Hey friends, Stephen Beddell here. So this is the first video in a new series where we explore Cubase plugins, both old and new, in a more practical and hands-on way. Rather than going through every single feature, the goal of this series is to focus on common production and mixing scenarios, and show you how these tools can actually help shape your sound in a musical and effective way. In this video, we're taking a look at Cubase's flagship EQ, Frequency 2. I'll walk you through a few practical ways I use it in my own productions. So let's get into it. Probably the most common way that I use EQ in my productions is just applying a simple high-pass filter. It's basic, but it's incredibly effective, and it's something that I'm doing in almost every project. I want you to take a listen to this arpeggiated piano sample. On its own, sounds beautiful, but we can hear and see on the EQ that there's a lot of low-end information there. Listening to it on its own, there's really no reason to make any EQ adjustments, but with EQ, I'm always thinking about context, and in the context of this track, if we listen to it with all of the other elements in the mix, I think that some of the low-end information in this piano sample is taking up too much room in this mix. I want the intro to sound a bit more spacious. Right now, I feel like it's kind of competing with this Rhodes. So if we come over here to the left and we make a little dip here on Module 1, you can see that our moves here correspond with this gain knob. And if I hold down Option or Alt, we can adjust the Q. Now, what I'm going to do is change the filter type from peak to cut 48. And listening back to this piano sample, I'm going to adjust the size of this cut. If I take this off solo and I listen to my intro now, for me, that just instantly adds so much clarity and openness in this intro, which is really important for this mix. The key thing to take away here is that by simply removing information that doesn't necessarily need to be there in your mix, you can clear up a lot of space for other instruments that are living in that same frequency range. So when you're shaping sounds with frequency, you might not always want to make static adjustments. In some cases, it might make more sense to use it in dynamic mode. Let me show you an example of when this comes in handy. Take a listen to this epic orchestral percussion. Now, in this case, I've got frequency applied to a group channel, and there's several percussion VSTs being bussed into it. And again, you can see and hear that there's a lot of low-end rumble. So in this case, we could do something similar to what I showed you in the last example. We can attenuate some of the sub-frequencies here, maybe below 50 Hertz. And something else I'm going to do here real quick is just click on this Auto Listen for Filters button. And now when I make adjustments to any of the modules, it'll solo that frequency band. So instead of making a static cut here at around 150 Hertz, where all this rumble is happening, I'm going to put Module 2 here in dynamic mode. We can activate that here up on the top right, or we can switch the view here to single. And I prefer this view here because when we activate dynamics, we can make adjustments to all of these important parameters here, like attack, release, and threshold. Let's attenuate here at around 115 Hertz, and watch what happens. So you can hear and you can see here visually that the EQ is reacting to the input signal of this percussive group. And the manner in which the EQ reacts to that signal can be fine-tuned with the threshold, attack, and release, just like you would with a compressor. Now, the reason that this dynamic mode is really useful in the case of this orchestral percussion is because earlier in this track, during the build-up section, the percussion is a lot less intense. During this section, I don't really need the EQ to do anything. It sounds good as it is. And when I bring up the EQ, you can see that there's nothing really happening as far as cutting in that lower frequency during this section. Because of where I have the threshold set, the input signal isn't loud enough to trigger this dynamic EQ, so that's perfect. Whereas during this climactic final section, you can clearly see and hear a big difference. So with frequency, you can also trigger the dynamic mode with a sidechain input. In fact, you can set up separate sidechain inputs for each of the 8 modules. It's a very powerful feature. Now, in the case of this track that I'm going to show you, if we come up to our sidechain routing, you can see that I have my kick as the sidechain source, and I have this instance of frequency applied to my bass. And what I'm trying to do here is shape the mix around my kick. I really want that kick to be front and center in the mix. I want it to hit hard. And what I'm doing here is telling frequency to dip some of the lows out of the bass every time that kick hits. So this is sort of a stylistic effect that could also be accomplished with a compressor. I could, dip the volume of the bass to shape it around the kick. But the way that I have it set up here, it lets the kick punch through by creating space only where the bass and the kick overlap, without changing the overall level or feel of the bass. So before, it's a big fat bass sound, and it sounds good, but again, this is sort of a stylistic choice. By shaping the bass around the intensity of that kick, it just has the effect of making that kick feel a lot more punchy. Last thing I want to show you here in frequency is how to do mid-side processing. In this example here, I have frequency 2 applied to the stereo output of this track. And what I'm going to do is make some adjustments to the overall mix. So giving this section a quick listen. So let's say I want to brighten this mix up just a bit. We could come up to module 6 here, for example, and we could add a bit of a boost. Generally, if I'm using frequency as a mastering EQ, I'm only going to be making small, subtle adjustments. And you'll notice that when I make an adjustment to this module, it says listen stereo. If we open up the single view here, and we change this from stereo to mid-side, now we can make adjustments to either the mid, which is all of the information that's common to both the left and right channels, is what you hear in the center of the mix. Or we can make adjustments to the side, which is where all of the stereo width and space lives. So let's select side. Now, if I play this track and I make an adjustment to the side module, you can hear all of that side information. So I'm boosting some of the top end here a little in this mix, but just on the side, which is kind of a cool way to add a bit of stereo width to this mix. To get this effect, you can also try boosting a bit of the mid-range in the side too. So listening to the mix before with no processing. It's just a bit darker, and with the EQ. Where I think it really makes a difference is the acoustic guitars. They kind of shine on the sides a little bit more. So that's taking a quick look at frequency. I really hope you enjoyed that. I hope you picked up a few tips. If you did, then make sure to hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel for more Cubase content. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.